In this video, we're going to talk about the master budget. And the master budget, it's important to note, is not actually one budget. It's not like one really large budget for the entire firm. It's actually a series of interrelated budgets. So it's a series of budgets. And these budgets are going to detail basically the sales, production, and financial goals for the firm. A series of budgets that deal with the firm's goals, how the firm is going to get there, and then ultimately, when we're thinking about the output, when we have this master budgeting process, what we're looking to come up with is a cash budget, which is going to be really important in terms of determining whether we have enough money to make it through the different quarters during the year. Maybe we're a seasonal business and we do most of our business, our sales in the fourth quarter for retail holiday shopping, and we said we want to make sure we have enough cash in the beginning, and so we do this cash budget, and then also we're going to have a budgeted income statement and a budgeted balance sheet. Those are going to be basically the final output of this master budgeting process. So when we think about putting together this master budget, this series of interrelated budgets, it's all going to start with coming up with a sales budget. So when we think about our sales budget, that's really the most important, or I should say most foundational budget that we're going to be making, because without the sales budget, we're not going to be able to make a lot of the other budgets. For example, our next budget is going to be the production budget. Now, if you just think about the production budget for a moment, we're going to need to know how many units we're going to have to produce, right? We have to say, okay, how many units to produce. But how can we know that if we don't know the sales budget of how many units we expect to sell? So if we say, okay, well, we're going to sell 10,000 units, that gives us an idea of how many units we're going to need to produce. Now, you might say, okay, well, where do we come up with the sales budget? How do we put this together? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have to talk to the marketing department. Just put MKT. So we're going to need a marketing forecast of sales. Right now, that's really not an accounting function. That's really not. It's a little beyond what we're talking about in this video. But you go to the marketing people, you get a forecast, and you say, okay, here's a number of units we expect to sell in quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, and then here's the prices that we're going to receive. So then you say, okay, well, 100 units times $5 a unit. Okay, we're expecting sales of $500. So in any event, when you come up with a sales budget based on this marketing forecast, that's going to allow you to put together these other budgets, particularly the production budget. And also there's another budget which I actually didn't write in here because I wanted to make it a little bit easier. I didn't want to have way too many lines and so forth. But there's going to be another budget that we need the sales budget to make, and that is called the SG&A budget. And let me put it. I've already written over here, and I apologize. This is going to look terrible, but I just didn't want to overwhelm you with information. But we're also going to have the selling, general, and administrative expense budget, and that is going to be based off of the sales budget. And you might be thinking, why? Right? SG&A, we've got a lot of things like the CEO's salary in SG&A. Is that real? Do we need to know the sales budget to compute that? Well, remember, the SG&A also has selling expense. That's what the S stands for. And a lot of that will be based on the number of units. For example, the sales commissions that we pay to our salespeople will be based on the number of units sold or things like that. So basically, this sales budget is not going to only allow us to do the production budget, but also to do the SG&A budget. Now, the SG&A budget is off here on the side, so let's not think about that for a moment. Now, let's think about this production budget. So when we think about this production budget, we don't need to just know, okay, how many units are we going to sell during the period. We also need to know, okay, well, what do we want to have in our ending inventory, right? We're going to think we're going to have an ending inventory, and so that's an important thing to think about, because we don't just need the 500 units we're going to sell. Maybe we need an extra 200 for like a buffer supply of inventory. And so we'll say, well, actually, we'll have this other budget, an ending inventory budget. And again, I didn't write that in there because when I kind of zoom out and show you all the budgets, I didn't want you to be too freaked out and see all these budgets. But let's just follow this progression right here, up to down, and these are kind of on the side, this ending inventory budget and the SG&A. Let's leave those aside for a second. Now let's focus back on, we got our sales budget, that allows us to put together the production budget, how many units we need to produce, right? But now that we say how many units we need to produce, we need to think about direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead, right? Now, this is assuming here we're talking about a manufacturing firm. If we're not talking about a manufacturing firm, then we actually have to put together a merchandise purchases budget, right? And that's just kind of in lieu of the production budget, direct materials, and all that. We just have a merchandise purchases budget. Like if we're Walmart and we're just buying, we're a retailer, we're buying things and then reselling them, we're not going to have any direct materials, direct labor, overhead, those types of things incurred in producing any units. So we're not going to have a production budget. We just have that merchandise purchases budget in lieu of all these things right here. So, but let's just stick with the more complicated example, the manufacturer. We say how many units we need to produce. Now we can use that to say how much do we need in terms of direct materials, direct labor, and overhead. We can't say how many direct materials we need until we know how many units we need to produce and what we want for ending inventory and so forth, right? And then we don't know how many units we need to produce until we know how many units we're going to sell. So that's what we talk about when we say this master budgetary process where all these budgets are interrelated. So let's stay with this up-down progression here. Now that we know our direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead, when we think about those budgets, now we can go and put together this cash budget. And again, I said the cash budget is very important because you need to make sure that during the year you're not going to run out of cash, right? You don't want a thing where, oh, well, we do a lot of our business in the summer because we sell ice cream, and then, oh, no, it's the winter time and we ran out of cash because we didn't do a good job budgeting. So for each quarter, we're going to have this cash budget that goes through each quarter, what our cash needs are, what our expected cash receipts are. Do we have to do any borrowing to meet our cash needs for, let's say, the first quarter? So the cash budget, of course, we need to know all these other things, kind of the direct materials and all these different things, before we can think about the cash budget. And then we can also think of things like, now if we remember back here with our SG&A, that's also going to inform our cash budget as well. So we can just write down a little line. So there are actually a lot of things that are going to come back to this cash budget as well as the sales. Right? So let me just draw a little line here. So I don't want to draw too many lines, and this is already looking pretty ugly. But the main idea is we've got this flow from top down, right? So we got to start with our sales forecast, figure out the sales, then we know how many units we need to produce, and then we can start thinking about the materials and labor to produce those units. And ultimately, all this is going to come back. All these different things are going to inform what our cash budget is, our cash receipts, our cash disbursement, what our cash needs are as we progress through the year. Now, we talked about, so we've got all our budgets here, right? But we're also going to ultimately put together a budgeted income statement and a budgeted balance sheet, right? So these aren't based on real numbers. These are based on what we think our income statement is going to look like, what we think our balance sheet is going to look like. And these are just going to come down here, and unfortunately you won't be able to see the entire screen. And so we've got our budgeted income statement, and not only do we use this cash budget, obviously, to put together the budgeted income statement, but if we drew a long line back, and I'm not going to scroll up, but back to our sales budget is also going to obviously be involved in coming up with our budgeted income statement. And then once we have a budgeted income statement, we can go ahead and use that to put together the budgeted balance sheet. And there are probably some relationships that I accidentally forgot about mentioning here. For example, that SG&A, you remember, was way up here. That SG&A obviously is also, that budget of SG&A is also going to be used to make our budgeted income statement when we think about what do we expect our SG&A expense to be. And then ultimately the budgeted balance sheet we're also going to be using. So this cash budget will be involved, and then the income statement as well, knowing what we expect our net income to be. So you see that all these relationships are interrelated, right? We can't just come out and put together a balance sheet without first doing a cash budget and an income statement, right? So we really, these are really interrelated in a number of ways, and you see how important now it is that we get a good sales forecast and do a good sales budget, because if you have one mistake up here, that's really going to flow through the entire system, and we're going to end up with perhaps way too many direct materials, raw materials on hand, or we hired too much labor, or we got too many units, or we got all these different things. So really, one mistake in the system can affect it a lot because there are so many different things. So if you think about a manager who says, oh, you know what, I think I'm going to underestimate what my sales are going to be because I want to I want to make sure I meet my sales target. So if I overpromise and say, oh, I think I can meet 500 units in sales, but I really want to say 400 to my boss. Say I'm going to make 400 because I'd rather my boss be pleasantly surprised when I hit 500 than to promise 500 and not get there, right? So you say, okay, I know I could do this. True estimate is what I think I can do is 500, but I'm going to say I want 400. I'm going to put a little slack. They call that a budgetary slack. You say I'm going to put in a little. I can sell 400. So they say, okay, let's put 400 in the sales budget. But then in reality, you end up selling 500, which you knew, but you had just put this slack because you wanted to protect yourself, or this manager wanted to protect him or herself. And then so now we say, okay, well, we budgeted based on 400 units, not 500. So now our production budget was set to that 400 units. And now we need 100 extra, and so now we don't have the direct materials we need. We don't have the labor. We don't have all these different things. And so it can just create a lot of problems because of these interrelationships. And so budgeting is very important.